Now, what we've found is that tenants will book a showing within 24 to 48 hours. So I think it's about 67% of those showings are booked within 24 to 48 hours. And
Wow.
so what that signals is like, hey, they actually really don't want to wait until the weekend, and you're losing out if you do. And so that data and stats, it kind of goes to that point of this instant gratification and tenants wanting things now, and they're expecting Amazon delivery times with everything.
Hello, professional property managers. Andrew Smallwood here from Second Nature, and I'm joined by Dana Dunford today, CEO of Hemlane. Dana, welcome to the Triple Win Podcast.
Great. Thanks so much for having me, Andrew.
Absolutely. And I'm sure we've got folks who are listening to this that know you, are familiar with Hemlane. And I'm also confident we have people listening to this who are hearing your name and Hemlane's name for the first time. So just as a way of kind of introducing yourself to the audience, could you give people a little bit of background on you and on Hemlane?
Yeah, thanks. So my name's Dana. I am a real estate investor. I'm here in San Francisco, but I actually invest out of state. And so through that and kind of going through what all of these property managers have gone through with their own experience with tenants and managing the day-to-day of their rentals, we started a platform, Hemlane, which is both software but tech-enabled services to help you succeed with your rental properties.
Awesome. And Dana, I'm curious, kind of from the position you said, you have this kind of unique spot of you work with property managers on your platform, a lot of real estate investors, using your platform, and it's not just tech, right? There's services involved and kind of a network there. It's a unique approach, and it seems like it's actually been taking hold and some great momentum. I think you guys eclipsed 25,000 units on the platform. Am I remembering that right?
Yeah, we have a lot more than 25,000 that use our software. As far as our services, we have 28,000 using our services. And how I define services are rental assistants, showing coordinators, or repair coordinators. So something that is 24/7 immediate instant gratification for you or your tenants, because as you know, when you are a property manager or a real estate investor, it is around the clock. It's not a 9 to 5 job because emergencies do come up. Showings, most tenants want to see the properties on Saturdays and Sundays. And so we give you a little bit more of a backseat from that perspective with your properties.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for the clarification there. And so, you've got this kind of unique seat and you're immersed in this industry. I'm curious, what is top of mind for you as far as what trends are you noticing kind of in the market right now? What's got your attention, and what are you guys paying attention to at Hemlane?
Yeah, this is why I love other platforms like Second Nature that are kind of tapping into this as well. It's really the convenience culture. And I don't think it's spoken about enough, although people have signaled like, hey, social media is probably not that great. Something about it with mental health and what we've seen with like mental health trends. But it becomes much more than just that. When you look at consumer behavior today, everyone is expecting like this kind of immediate instant gratification. And what kind of started that, and how did that come up, and how does it change? One, I don't think it's going away. But two, and I think most importantly, when you look at the companies that are here and here to stay and growing the fastest, they all provide that immediacy to tenants, or just to consumers in general, but tenants are a large portion of the consumers, right? With 44 million renter households. So some examples of that, I mean, it goes back all the way to Uber, where before Uber, you'd call a taxi. They'd be like, yeah, I'll be there in like 20 minutes. And like you'd call them and say, do you have an update of when you're going to be here? Now, obviously, it's on your app, immediate. You don't like the time, you cancel, you rebook with Lyft. There's almost this anxiety. And I think that is why there's a lot to do with people getting upset and more like negativity out there, is because when things go wrong, you're expecting it to be right all the time. And that makes it even more challenging to be a property manager now than historically. And other examples of that more recently are DoorDash, right? Of, hey, I want something delivered immediately, Instacart, I need my groceries delivered to my door. And then Amazon, I used to obviously like think of someone's birthday, like Andrew, your birthday. I'd think about a couple of months in advance. I'd get the gift, 2 to 3 weeks out, or I'd plan the weekend to get it. Now it's like, great, it's their birthday today. I forgot. I'll go on Instacart and get something from Sephora, or more likely 2 days out. Great, Amazon 2-day delivery. What can I send to Andrew? And so I think with that and that immediacy that is brought into the everyday life, into everyone's everyday life, and that immediacy is like, oh, I'm bored. Let me go on Instagram. I'm, on my commute, I don't want to read a book. I'll just listen to a book right away. I think that immediacy, what you see with it is that tenants expect that same thing with their home experience. And so, one of the things for property managers to really keep in mind is, how do I balance that? How do I set expectations? But also, how do I just tap into that and make my reviews better and make the experience better by being able to service tenants in this immediate way? And I think that's the important conversation, Andrew, that I want to have with you today, to talk about that and how we can make that happen.
Yeah, this like you said, this topic is definitely near and dear to Second Nature's heart, and I'm reflecting on what you were sharing. It's like there's all these consumer experiences outside of the home that have brought speed and convenience right to the consumer. It's really conditioned consumers to expect that things can be happening quickly and reliably and of a high quality. I oftentimes hear that like triangle they talk about. It's like you can choose speed or quality, right, or price. Like you can pick two, so to
Yeah.
speak. But I think some of the companies you just mentioned kind of challenge that assumption, right? And they're saying, hey, actually, there's a customer need. We can meet here in a different way and innovate and ultimately, bring all three. And so, how are you thinking about some of the opportunities that are ripe in property management to do that, to bring convenience to the consumer, to bring speed, and do so in a way that's adding value? It's not just a trade-off somewhere else, or not too big of a trade-off where it's actually net less value for the consumer.
Yeah, I have 4 examples to bring up in the entire real estate journey, or I guess the property management journey. It starts with tenant inquiries and showings. I was for so long anti and against self-guided tours. And part of the reason I was against it was I was like, oh, there's going to be squatter problems and everything else that goes hand in hand with like someone physically not being there. I've actually found you can still meet the tenant in person before they move in or before you sign the lease, but getting them into the property today or tomorrow is way more important than anything else, and it actually reduces the chances of having a squatter. And so I think the first thing is like, hey, you need an automatic text message out to the tenant. It can be personalized, it can look personalized, and telling them what your requirements are, as well as where to schedule a showing. And those showings should be as soon as 4 hours from now, because another property manager may have a showing in 4 hours. And if yours isn't until Saturday and today is Thursday, you might have already lost that tenant. They may have already signed, gone through the application process, been approved within 24 hours, and you've lost that tenant, especially if your property is, looks very similar, maybe $20 less, but then the other property manager negotiates that $20 difference when they're talking to the tenant on the phone. So I think self-guided tours is one of them, having showings all the time so that you can really get up to add the expectations of the tenants. And with that, you want to have the best security process. So you obviously want driver's licenses, do it against their face so that you can use biometrics to make sure they are who they say they are. The ID matches the person. And then go ahead and have someone on call virtually who, when they get to the property, gives them a call, talks to them on the phone, asks if they have any questions, make sure they lock up afterwards. If there's any photos to send of things that they would potentially think need to be changed or look damaged, they can send those over to you. So self-guided tours is the first one, because I think that just helps you reduce your days on market for you and your clients, and advertise out. You can show the property 7 days of the week. The second, Andrew, is actually what Second Nature does, which I think is make that move-in and application process really smooth. So the whole concept of like online applications and background and credit checks, making those instant, has been around for 4 to 5 years. But I think the resident experience from the move-in and making that easier is the next big one. And so when a tenant signs a lease, if you tell them, great, it requires renter's insurance, and they have to go search for who's the best renter's insurance company out there, what should I do from a utilities setup perspective? Who are the utility partners? You're suddenly not providing them with that experience they expect of like, I click a button on Amazon and it's going to get to me and always be at my front door within 2 days, and I can track it. But I really think with Second Nature, you're able to provide that really instant gratification of saying, hey, to the tenant, no excuses. We'll just click through these buttons and get to what you need, and make that move-in process really simple. And I know I'm probably oversimplifying it because there's so much more that is provided with recurring services. But I think that online experience, here's what you get, here's how much it costs, pricing is fair. Tenants have a huge willingness to pay because they expect that, and they expect that in those experiences.
If I can pause before we go to 3 and 4,
Yeah.
I want to go back actually to the self-guided tours for a second. And I'm just curious, like, what you all have seen across your properties and data set of, can you share any insights as it relates to, here's the percentage of people that are doing this on Saturday and Sunday, or after typical hours, or for people who are still thinking, man, I've been doing in-person showings. It's like, it's still.
Now, what we've found is that tenants will book a showing within 24 to 48 hours. So I think it's about 67% of those showings are booked within 24 to 48 hours. Wow. And so what that signals is like, hey, they actually really don't want to wait until the weekend, and you're losing out if you do. And so that data and stats, it kind of goes to that point of this instant gratification and tenants wanting things now, and they're expecting Amazon delivery times with everything days, and understaffed during the week. And you know what? Maybe there's a point to be made pre-COVID that strategy would have worked, because I think more people were in the office Monday through Friday. But now, with a lot more remote work, and I think just more flexible work after COVID, it's really interesting. Guess, Andrew, what day and kind of time block is the most popular for tenants to view the property? And this is all just based on our data and the thousands of showings we do every month.
I'll take a stab here just to keep it going, but I'll probably reveal my ignorance. I'm going to guess like Tuesday from 5 to 7 p.m.
It's Friday mornings.
Wow.
And what's interesting about that is it's right before the weekend. And so we know for our customers that we need to get that application out before Saturday morning, with the background and credit check too, because we know we may be competing against another place on the weekend, and we want to get them closed and prove out that, hey, tenant, this was a fantastic experience. There's no need for you to look at another place on Saturday afternoon. We've already gotten you verified, reference checks, et cetera, out the door, and this is moving forward. So yeah, it's Friday morning, but it's actually, Andrew, you're semi-right, where during the week, and there's a difference, but I think it's only like 5 to 10%. Every day consistently has those showings. And what impacts the showings is actually the day they inquire. So once we launched self-guided tours, and before that, it was predominantly weekends and then like a Tuesday night, maybe some in-person showings. Before we launched self-guided tours, it's hard to say, when do they want to see the place, because you were restricted by the times and the days of the agent. Now, what we've found is that tenants will book a showing within 24 to 48 hours. So I think it's about 67% of those showings are booked within 24 to 48 hours. And
Wow.
so what that signals is like, hey, they actually really don't want to wait until the weekend, and you're losing out if you do. And so that data and stats, it kind of goes to that point of this instant gratification and tenants wanting things now, and they're expecting Amazon delivery times with everything. And of course, tenants get younger and younger as we get older, and so it will become even more prominent.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just thinking about this triple win outcome of it's a good thing for everybody if qualified applicants are getting to application more quickly, right? And it's like that's obviously good for the resident who's trying to find their next home, right? The place they're going to be. It's good for the investor that's reducing the vacancy time, right, and the cost between them and rent revenue coming in, and for the property manager, right? In addition to that, but I also like that you spoke to, hey, you do want to be thoughtful about if you're taking this kind of approach, you want to have the right checks in place to ensure you're not letting unqualified or fraudulent applicants through, whether it's
Mhm.
biometrics or other things to control for that, so that, hey, this is truly a lift and accretive and not a trade-off. I thought that was great how you walked through that. Okay, you talked about the move-in experience, which is definitely close to second nature. Some of our products are right there at that point, and we do think about how do we make this as easy as possible for people to get the insurance coverage that they need or get utilities connected or whatever it might be. Is there anything else? I guess you mentioned like 3 and 4. What are the other things you think are great tactical kind of practical things property managers can be thinking about to bring more convenience to the experience they're offering their customers?
Yeah, so I think one of the big mistakes that property managers make is they either over automate it, where they have like these automated tone deaf responses where they don't have someone there when the tenant needs it. An example is actually self-guided tours, where they will have a tenant at the property and the lockbox or the keypad is not working and they don't have anyone on the phone with them, and that actually hurts the reputation of property managers. And we've heard that before from tenants when they're on the phone with our showing coordinators being like, oh, if it's self-guided tour, how do I know I went to this one and it was a bad experience? It's like, no, we're there with you the full time. We can even get on a FaceTime if you need to. You just let us know. We will be there 100%. You're not going to go and try to open this lockbox and it's not going to work. So I think the same thing transpires into management. And so my third one is repair coordination. With repair coordination, this is one that really ticks tenants off because a lot of property managers will, one, not do proper troubleshooting up front to really understand what the problem is. The vendor goes on site, the vendor doesn't have the parts, the tenant has to reschedule. It's another week before they get out there. It's really troubleshooting and understanding right off the bat, immediately, like right when the request comes in, what can the tenant do to reduce damage? How can they de-escalate this? How can they try certain things so we know what the problem is? Or even better, how can they fix it on their own? And so, like, for example, our troubleshooting process, 7% of requests are closed before getting out of the troubleshooting step. And that's while the tenant is putting it in. So that's the first one. And then the second one is having a repair coordinator who's really strong on project management, able to do that. And that's where I think a lot of folks get it wrong because they use virtual coordinators. These virtual coordinators know nothing about repairs. They're not a repair coordinator. They're just like a VA online. And their project management skills aren't there. For every tenant, it's like, okay, we understand what the problem is. Here is the standard turnaround time. And here's what we've done to drive this forward. Like, they're not going to go out of that request until they've sent out the job request, also to large property managers, a work order, but I find work order to be a very enterprise term. So I like the word job request instead. But sending that out, having the tenant schedule in advance, everything to drive everything forward, and then letting the tenant know, great, you'll hear from us in 24 hours of when the service professional has booked a time with you. And so I think that helps ease a tenant's anxiety because it's very similar to the Amazon experience. When you go through Amazon, You go through and fill it out, and then it says like you've got a little bar at the top and it tells you how long until the next step. Very similarly, I think property managers need to set up their systems that way, or have someone who is doing that for them. And we do it 24/7. So if a request comes in at 2 a.m. in the morning, we're doing the troubleshooting with them instantly. And so I think that's another really important part of how you can work with your tenants. A fun fact just about how instant things are, Amazon did a survey and they predicted that if their website loaded 1 second slower, they would lose $1.6 billion in revenue a year. And that's just how much people expect things now. And I think a lot of property managers say, I cannot work that much, and trying to get the headcount to work 24/7 doesn't make sense. And so I think tapping into those who can do that for you is really helpful. So I think the second one is really on repair coordination when tenants have requests in.
Yeah. So, it's interesting thinking about this, Dana. I had a family member over the holidays who was talking about who rents, and they were talking about having a furnace effectively, going out, and how they were talking to me about their experience with their property manager. And they're like, yeah, I was calling them every 2 hours, to see what was going
Yeah.
on. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm like, you're that resident who's always calling, et cetera, over and over again. But it made me realize, hey, bringing that transparency, that Domino's pizza tracker type of experience, right, answers those kind of questions, for residents, as opposed to feeling like they have to constantly call back and check in and see if things are
Yeah.
moving as fast as they want to. How important that is, in addition to everything you can do to coordinate quickly and move things through the process quickly. I thought that's a great point.
Yeah. And Andrew, another thing about this family member of yours is when they called in, it's probably an after hours repair line. And those are what's sold to property managers. And it's the biggest waste of money. And it's the silliest thing, because you know what those call centers do? They pick up the phone and they say, hi, tenant, thanks so much. What's your question? They write it down and they're like, great, the property manager will get back to you at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. And suddenly all they are doing is putting the work back on the property manager. And to the tenant, it's like, well, you haven't told me the ETA. You haven't solved my problem. And it increases their anxiety because they are so used to every app telling them exactly on what day, at what second, that package or that delivery for food is going to be dropped off at their house. And so if they don't have the same thing, that's a problem for them. And so another thing, like another example on that is like if they're out of heat and it's like, yeah, this is an emergency. We're trying to get someone dispatched. It's like, that's not the right answer. The right answer is, okay, it's 11 p.m. We are getting someone dispatched, but most likely they're not going to be able to fix it tonight. Like if you've done the troubleshooting, go get a portable heater. We will go ahead and make sure this gets reimbursed, put it in the bedrooms, have a good night's sleep. And in the morning, someone will be out, if not before then. That is a way better answer to a tenant than like, great, I've just taken your call and I'll let you know what the property manager says. And so I think a lot of times how things have been structured for property managers is completely incorrect, because they miss the whole point of you need empowerment and you need to have professionals who can actually handle the situation end to end. And the best companies, like when you look at the Amazons and DoorDashes of the world, and really how we built our product too, is like they can solve it end to end, everything from the payment to the beginning, and they have the property manager specific requirements in place. And Second Nature does that too, where you guys have specific requirements where you know this property does require renter's insurance, it does have a yard, and all of that really helps reduce that anxiety where you can solve the problem end to end. And I think the best companies and the best property managers will win when they have that structure in place.
Yeah, Dana, I love this example and just bringing it to life with that. A question, sometimes I hear debate in the industry about smaller companies and larger companies. And one of the arguments I often hear for the smaller operators is a lot of times, hey, for this sense of urgency and everything else that they kind of bring to things, in many cases, they're doing that. And as you're growing a larger company, it can be challenging to kind of create a culture where that kind of sense of urgency and the right information empowered with the right decision authority, everything else, right, is being executed consistently. But I imagine at the scale you guys, are at, and the passion you have for this, that's something you've brought a lot of attention to. And so I'm just curious, how have you guys kind of worked on scaling out that
Yeah.
kind of great interaction and experience?
Yeah, that's such a great question, Andrew. So, yeah, with 28,000 rentals where we're doing repair coordination, the real question is like, how do you do that at scale, and how do you have 4.7-star reviews? And when we get 1-star reviews, sometimes it's because we're like tenant pest control, like per your lease, that's like your responsibility. And so, how do you get such high reviews? I actually think when you get larger, it gets better, but you have to have the mentality of only A+ players on your team. And what I mean by that is we're very big on data. And so even as a property manager, you should be as well. We have, for every single repair coordinator that we have, or showing coordinator, like whatever the job is, we actually have both activity metrics and SLAs they have to meet. Very similar to Amazon. Like, you have no idea how Amazon gets on Christmas Eve packages within 2 days to your house when everyone else and their mother has ordered Amazon packages for 2-day delivery, but they do.
Mm-hmm.
And they show up on time. And so with that, it's very similar. Of you can vary as you grow and scale. You can use benchmarks and say, here are our top performers. Everyone has to be at that level. And so you can see, did they miss their SLAs? Are they not making as many calls as others to the service professionals to really push things out? You can tell the call quality when the calls are recorded. You can tell if the person on the other line's getting upset. So the second that you have all the data, you don't have to look at all the data. You only have to look at what's in red. And so if something is taking too long to dispatch, that's in red and gets escalated up. If the tone of someone in a message is negative, that's escalated in red. And so I think the bigger you get, the more you're able to put those types of tools in place. And then you're able to structure it where you just train the team on that customer service, how to do it well. They obviously have to have a background in repairs where they can troubleshoot anything in a house, and they're almost a handyman general contractor themselves, where they can call BS when a service professional's on site and something sounds off. Once you have all of that, then it's just a matter of the system working for you. And I think that is really important, and the best property managers win through having that.
Two questions about that. I'm curious if you might walk through, hey, these are 3, 4, 5 of the KPIs that we think are just kind of like critical, right, to delivering a great experience. And what benchmark or standard, do you recommend holding to that? I'd love to hear. And then second, maybe we'll start with this. You were talking about, okay, a lot of people think about, hey, you can objectively measure first call resolution. You can objectively measure, here's the kind of traditional stats that way. But I think you were talking about also raising, hey, through like a sentiment analysis or something like that.
Yeah.
Some of what would be considered more qualitative. Could you speak to that first and then address the KPI question?
Yeah. So the qualitative stuff is just essentially software that you can build into your backend that alerts you on these things. This call doesn't sound like it's going so well. This response from a tenant sounds angry. Just jump into there and see what's going on. And through that, you can really understand how can you very quickly de-escalate this before anything gets escalated. So that's software you can have, but again, you need enough properties or working with solutions that can do that for you. Does that answer that question, Andrew?
It does. It does.
Great.
I'm curious, is there a provider you recommend or use?
There are a couple, and I'm not sure which one. We've tried 4 or 5 on our back end, so I actually have to talk to our engineering team which one they went with fully, because they went with a couple of them, tested them, and I know they implemented one of the 4, but there's plenty out there. But I know they had tested, our product team had tested 4 of them. Then on the side of KPIs, that's interesting because there's certain KPIs like number of messages logged, which is actually a terrible one for whether the person is performing well. You want them to have a minimum number of messages, like to make sure they're communicating, but almost too many messages means these messages are really tone deaf or not really driving things forward. And so what I mean by that is, like, Andrew, if you put in a repair request and your sink is clogged, if I'm like, thanks, Andrew, I'll get someone out shortly, and that's one message, that's one comment logged, then 3 hours later, I'm like, hey, Andrew, I've got ABC Plumbing that confirmed that they're scheduled for a time with you at whatever time. Like that just keeps logging them. But the question is, how do you shorten that and have the response to Andrew be like, great, we've just dispatched this to ABC Plumbing, and give them more upfront. And so I don't think the quantity of messages is what it is. For us, it's time to dispatch. So, how quickly can you get a service professional scheduled in the calendar? Now, the tenant schedule may prevent you from scheduling it this week because the tenant is on vacation, but how can you get someone actually scheduled from a time that the tenant has specified? So, that's number one. The second is on reviews ratings. So we ask the owner and manager as well as the tenant for reviews, and we say this isn't shared with the service professional, but how, and the repair coordinator, but how are they doing? How is the service professional doing? If a repair coordinator has under 4.3-star reviews, they have to look for a new job. They are not doing their job and over delivering to tenants. So it's the reviews and ratings. And then the third one that we have is number of closed requests every single month, because someone who can dispatch quickly, get strong reviews, and get through requests because they're so efficient and reducing that time is a huge win for us. So while there's like 5,000 metrics, I think we track across the company, and each management and division is looking at their own individually. Those are ones that I personally think the operators, so the directors and managers of each department, should be looking at.
Yeah, no, thanks for walking through that. I think that's great. Dana, here's where I want to go next is I want to ask like a couple rapid fire questions before we kind of wrap up here. And the first one I'd love to ask is, what do you think is the biggest problem or biggest opportunity in the industry right now for property managers that nobody's really talking about or not enough people are talking about?
Gosh, there's a lot of them. The first one I would talk about is regulations and getting everyone together to talk about legislation and what's happening. I think that the job of a property manager has gotten a lot more challenging because there's so many more laws. You almost need a law degree just to keep up with some cities and counties regulations. How do you get everyone together and very objectively go and help get the word out there? I know a lot of the apartment associations do that. I know NARPM helps with that, but how do you really band property managers together to make it where the industry does not, it's almost simplified, not as complex. And I actually think that will help property managers because then tenants are much more aligned because it's much more simple to know exactly what's right and what's wrong.
Yeah. Regulation. All right. Next question. Keep it rapid fire here. What's your favorite book to recommend to somebody in the property management industry?
Well, because of what we were just talking about, I would say it's 4,000 Weeks. Do you know what 4,000 Weeks is, Andrew?
No, it's the first time I'm hearing this.
It's the average number of days someone lives. And so it's all about this balance of getting things fast and then also thinking about your life over those 4,000 weeks and what you want to accomplish and how to do it right and time management.
Okay. So the title of the book is 4,000 Weeks?
4,000 Weeks. That's correct.
Awesome. I'm sure we'll find a link to that and put it in the show notes. Okay. Next one. Best advice you've ever been given as a leader in this industry?
This one, I think a lot of property managers can relate to is don't run out of cash. I think the biggest thing when you're a business owner and entrepreneur getting started is really being able to balance the P&L and make sure that the one thing not holding you back is cash, and that you can continue to move forward and have the right systems in place because you have the right unit economics and bottom line.
Yeah, great. Okay, last couple. Next one is, what do you think is the biggest mistake that property managers are making today?
I think the biggest mistake is on the team and hiring side. I think a lot of them, one, there's two different points of it. One, they don't think that they can hire, so they try to do everything, and then they forget they're usually, if you're the broker or owner, you should just be looking to get more doors, network, really make a name for yourself out there. So I think that's a first. And then hand in hand with that, it's like when you hire, I think a lot of times they hire the wrong people, or they don't take it very seriously. And an example of that, or let me just kind of tell you how I think about it, is when I talk to a lot of property managers and I say, great, you hired this person, how many people did you interview? They're like, oh, I kind of like put a job post on Craigslist or LinkedIn or whatever, and I got like 12 people, and I interviewed them and, accepted one. It's like, for our job positions, we are literally talking to 120 people. We have over 1,000 resumes that come in our door, and we're picking the best. And I think that if you have a better mentality like that, and you divide and unbundle to say what is better for it to be local versus what could be done virtually, I think that they can open up their pool and get a lot stronger in their operations.
Okay. And last one here, as you look to the future, what excites you most, or what are you most optimistic about for the industry of property management?
There's a lot I'm optimistic about. I think tech, and obviously I'd be remiss if I didn't say AI. But I think there's actually a different one. I actually think that self-driving cars will change the industry, because real estate and where people live and where they manage and all of that will change, where they live versus where they work. So I'm kind of excited to see how that changes the game and makes property managers more efficient as well.
Okay, I got to ask a follow-up on that.
Yeah.
Would you say the thesis is, if there's self-driving cars, hey, maybe the way we've heard all these statistics for years about how much people hate their commutes and everything else, that, hey, maybe if they're not driving so much and this is that, it is, people are willing to tolerate longer commutes and they're living further away from cities? What's your kind of thought on how self-driving might shape things differently, and how and where people are investing in real estate?
Yeah, I think the big thing for a property manager is most are overworked and underpaid. And that's just the nature of property management. I think for them, a lot of times they're like driving all over the place, driving all over to meet a tenant for a move out and get the keys, driving all over to, if they've done the showings via self-guided tours, to meet the tenants in person, or having the tenants come meet them. And it's very much of a localized game. And so I think for them, they'll be able to go to more places, optimize their commutes, et cetera, and be able to even manage properties farther away. Because imagine if I live in Nashville and can manage, what's a good suburb that's like 40 minutes away?
You could say Spring Hill.
Spring Hill, and I want to manage properties in Spring Hill, I would probably say no to those properties if there weren't self-driving cars. But the second you have self-driving cars, I could go over there and get all my admin work done on my computer as I'm driving in my commute over, meet with an owner, sell them on it, and then literally get back in, go back, or do 12 other properties in there. And then on top of that, do self-guided tours and everything else, and have a local handyman, and be able to remotely manage these a lot better. And then when I need to be there, it's not so much of, gosh, I've got a 2-hour commute. You can actually, on that commute, be very productive.
Okay. So, hey, we've heard of work from office. We've heard of work from home. Now it's like work from car.
Work from your car. Yeah. Yeah. You get a latte while
Wow.
you're at it, Andrew.
I'll tell you, that's a unique insight that I don't think a lot of people are talking about. That's a great one to end on. Dana, thank you so much for just generously sharing your thoughts, your insights, your experience here, what you guys are up to at Hemlane, the great growth you guys are having over there. We really appreciate you joining us today.
Thanks, Andrew. I had a lot of fun today.
Awesome. Take care.